Hello everyone, welcome to the Dungeon Scrap channel. This is going to be the first video, so I'll give a brief explanation on what the channel is about and what this video is about after. Basically, Dungeon Scrap is going to be a channel focused on Dungeons and Dragons with like variety content and possibly other TTRPGs depending on how the, videos do. No matter what, I'll make more content obviously, but if we expand to others is based off, if there's at least some interest. Obviously, I'm not going to start asking like, oh, get a 5,000 or something right off the bat. But you know what I mean. Anyway, this channel main focus is going to be like a few series, basically, is what I'm going to be running. And I'll give a better explanation of what these series are at the end. But for now, this video is going to be about one of these series, which I can explain now since we're going to go over what we're doing this video anyway. For this first episode, we're going to have basically a group or factions facing off against each other. And we'll be in the Underdark, where I'll be taking some monsters from the 5th edition Monster Manual and the 5th edition Volo's Guide. No, Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse, not Volo's Guide. We won't be using 5.5 since there's no 5.5 version of Mordenkainen's, obviously. There will be a few battles, basically following a group of Duragar, which is what we're going to be following this video. And first, I'll explain what the Underdark is for anyone unaware. It's basically under the surface of D&D's world. There's a very large amount of connecting caves, large enough, in fact, it's basically an entirely different world. And with a complete lack of light, obviously, the Underdark has developed different ecosystems, cultures, and societies. These groups have a variety of origins. Some people were forced down here or were more adapted to living in caves. Others had societies that always lived and thrived in the Underdark. And there aren't any notable changes in the Underdark currently, at least that are relevant to the combat between the groups we'll have at the moment. Duragar are a very well-established species with a history in the Underdark. These Duragar have an inherent psionic power, which originate from a past of being enslaved by mind flayers. And Duragar, before being what they are now and enslaved by the mind flayers, were basically dwarves, I should explain, so they'll share some similarities with them. And if anyone doesn't know what a mind flayer is, imagine an alien with psychic powers is the best way to put it. At least in the short term. There's obviously a lot more to them than that. But basically they were enslaving the Duragar until the mind flayers had grown pretty complacent, considering they'd become quite powerful in the world. So they weren't very prepared for a rebellion. This past with the mind flayers also left Duragar with a resistance to being charmed or basically mental manipulation. And they boast a resistance to poison and paralysis, like dwarves. And also, just living in the Underdark, that's very useful, since poison is very common in the Underdark specifically. And because most dwarves, share this resistance to poison, dwarves don't actually have the paralysis part, last time I checked. It's just specifically poison. So that's uniquely Duragar for some reason, not really sure why. And let's see. This is a small side tangent, but Duragar also have the ability to basically grow or shrink and turn themselves invisible, which isn't related to their psionics, but just from living underground and absorbing magic. Which is a weird explanation because there's quite a few species that live in the Underdark and don't have random, psychic abilities or anything. Like drow are pretty common resident of the Underdark, but none of them really develop anything like that spontaneously. But that might just be a difference between dwarves and elves, who knows. And now let's move on to, let's see. Here we go. That does cover all the special abilities of the Duragar. And most are naturally, as most dwarves are, they're, strong with a good constitution. Obviously, not every Duragar is like that, but, if you were to look at the standard, which would be this group here, all of them do share decent strength and constitution. And, of course, not every Duragar is just basic, weapons and such. Some do try to mix, technology, as far as you can go with technology in Dungeons & Dragons, obviously, with psionics. Some of this tech isn't exactly ethical, which seems to be something they took from the Mind Flayers. But it's not the only thing they adapted. The Duragar also adapted the Mind Flayers' use of slavery, which is a bit iffy, but, I guess not really much to say about that. In this little gauntlet, we'll move on back to that, we'll be following a group of Duragar traveling from basically where they live in like one stronghold to another. That's basically the end goal here. If they make it, let's not bet on that. Why they're moving along isn't too important. Let's just say they're delivering something, important enough to warrant some decent security. So we'll have a few special, like, Duergar ranks, basically. There are different kind of, different named Duergar. Not named, more like titles. You understand? We'll also have some fodder Duergar in there to just show what makes the other ones cooler, I guess is how you could put it. So first, we'll see them traveling across a rocky cliff region with a few Quaggoths, including a Quaggoth Thonot. This is a special version of a Quaggoth that also has psionic abilities. Not as impressive as Duergar psionics, but still. And for a brief explanation, Quaggoths have a good climbing ability and are physically stronger than Duergar. And they live in basically tribes when they're in the wild, and this cliff-covered region is, usual territory for Quaggoths. This is where they usually live because they have their climbing. And they also have this ability where they deal extra damage when very wounded. They aren't extremely intelligent, but they're smart enough to form a little tribal society, so there won't be any advanced tactics, but they'll be smart enough to play to their strengths a little. In fact, I have a fun little idea for how these Quaggoths will be fighting in this encounter. They will be using their strong athletics bonus, which helps them determine grapple rolls. And they'll be using this to specifically try and pull the Duergar off the cliff, where, since they have a climbing speed, they can just hang on to the ledge. The Duergar cannot. So it'll be basically a goal to grab them, pull them from the ledge, and drop them. These Quaggoths have a +5 to athletics, which really helps with the strategy specifically. And since I really like this idea for an encounter in general, we're going to be trying this out in the Duergar. And, I doubt they would be able to pull a Duergar who uses Enlarge. Although rules is written, they technically can, but, it'd have to be a pretty high roll. Thonot Quaggoth can actually use Enlarge/Reduce too, so, it may be one of their useful spells here. And, but that's back to being psychic, meaning you can grow big, which is weird. Quaggoths can do that. Anyway, I haven't gone over Quaggoth's lore too much yet, so I'll make this relatively short. They basically used to be nocturnal hunters above ground until, for some reason, elves drove them underground, with near extinction, which seems a bit extreme, but, they seem to be intelligent enough to understand this history, at least a little, and they used to be less savage before ending up underground where food was scarce, and basically they kind of became a bit barbaric. And I can see how their athletic skills from climbing like trees and stuff transferred to the rocky underground terrain. And let's see, before we start combat, I do need to actually introduce this Duergar group, right? So, there are going to be a few interesting Duergar here, but not enough like open slots to justify using them all, obviously, since some would be too strong and make this not too fun, since they're basically boss Duergar I could put in here, but they would kind of take away some of the tension from having them fight, because they would probably just win easily. But they're going to have 4 special, like, named title Duergars and 2 basic ones. And let me go ahead and introduce them now. Okay, starting off our special Duergar, we have a Duergar Stone Guard. These are considered elite troops among Duergar and aren't too different besides being tougher and having a unique ability. This ability is called Phalanx Formation. It lets the Stone Guard get advantage on attacks and dexterity saving throws when within 5 feet of another Duergar who has a shield. Our next Duergar is a Hammerer. This Duergar is in a construct that acts as a suit of armor. It's not a very comfortable suit of armor, but it lets them use their reaction to attack anyone who attacks them. And the Hammerer is here specifically to deal with any obstructions, since they are considered a siege machine and deal double damage to objects or structures. They also do not have the ability to turn invisible or grow larger. The next Duergar we have is a Soul Blade. They have trained their psionic powers to the point where they can form a blade of psionic energy. And finally, our last unique member is a Duergar Zeron. They use alchemy and psionics to make special weaponry. Specifically, this one will be using a fire-enhanced lance, basically. And our last 2 will be regular Duergar, who have their usual psionics, but are standard, but they also can activate the Stone Guard's Phalanx ability. Now, like I said, these Duergar will be traveling on a pretty narrow path with a more expansive part later on. For the first part of the fight, the goal will probably be reaching this point, and once they're in this position, safer from the fall, the Duergar can try and fight the Quaggoths head on. Now, it's not exactly correctly shown, but to clear things up, we have an area here that can be climbed up to, and there's also a lower area where the Quaggoths will be attempting to pull the Duergar. If the Duergar are pulled here, the others will have a chance to help if they have a reaction. Otherwise, being pulled here will be fatal due to the drop. Here, you can see the Duergar's marching order, and also, the opponents, which are 2 regular Quaggoths and a Thonot. This is only the first encounter, so the goal should be making it to the larger platform, and if things get bad enough, just kind of leaving the area. And actually, cancel out that thing I said about being able to try and help with a reaction. It's not like they're players, giving them like extra leeway isn't necessary. Anyway, the Duergar can escape if they reach the right side of this path here, which is likely considering even with the stronger Duergar, Quaggoths are pretty strong in comparison just from looking at the stats. Looking at these stats, actually, I'm realizing Quaggoths can talk, apparently. They can speak Undercommon, which is crazy to me. I didn't expect that with a 6 intelligence, which is very low, if you didn't know. I thought that wasn't even high enough to, communicate. Well, at least with, a language. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Let's begin the battle. Okay, so I set up the squares here so you can see about how far down the 3 Quaggoths are hanging. Each square is about 5 feet of movement, so they're about 10 feet down waiting to ambush anyone. And the Duergar have pretty low passive perception, so the Quaggoths should be able to pull this off pretty easily. And starting off with a successful surprise round, the Quaggoth in the back will climb up and attempt to pull the Zeron. I have to look that up. Is that the correct pronunciation? I hope so. Anyway, it's time for some competing athletics rolls. The Quaggoth will have the advantage here, being slightly stronger with a +5 to athletics checks specifically. The Quaggoth won the contest, so this Zeron. This one is probably doomed. And while with players, I'd obviously give a second chance, like with that help thing I said earlier. These are not players. So Zeron is going to end up going off the ledge. There was a quick one going down, which I probably should have expected. Anyway, but we probably won't be seeing any fire weapons for this. I'll have to do a little section later if enough get pulled off to where they can have their own little thing. The Quaggoth pulls their prey to the edge and drops them, and obviously, depending on if any more drop, we'll have a mini section. The Soul Blade was the second highest initiative, so since one Duergar already got pulled off the ledge, the rest will try to focus on escape. Not like leaving everyone behind, but making sure as many can. So the Soul Blade will move to the larger area by dashing, and they'll also activate Enlarge to give them a better chance of stopping any grab attempts. Next up, the Stone Guard will move 30 feet, making sure not to dash so they can hold their action to attack the next Quaggoth that climbs up, specifically using Javelin as a ranged attack. Looking at the turn order, the 2 standard Duergar will probably be in the most danger from what I can see. There's a chance one still escapes. With the others, so it shouldn't be a large issue. The Hammerer will move to join the others since they can't do much to help here, honestly. And now to the rolls that will decide the last 2 Duergars and what's going to happen to them. The Quaggoth rolled poorly enough to not be able to grab them and got an 8 on the athletics check. Unfortunately, the Duergar rolled even worse with a 5, actually, so they did actually grab them, and that one goes down too. The Stone Guard still gets to attempt their Javelin attack, though, which is a critical failure. Stone Guard are supposed to be the elite warriors? I'm kidding. It's bad luck, of course. Anyway, this Duergar has a chance to save themselves. Unfortunately, this one rolled a 6, which doesn't beat the Quaggoth's 9. This was a very unlucky encounter for the Duergar, and since each Quaggoth got a catch, let's just say they won't try and catch the others. Apparently, kidnapping Quaggoths was a stronger strategy than I thought. Obviously, I'm going to reduce the number of encounters here. I initially planned around 4 for the whole group, but instead, we'll do 2 more. One with these 3 and one with those other 3 that were pulled down. Let's start with our survivors first. I'll shift maps and tell you basically a part of Quaggoth lore that connects what we're about to do right now. So since Quaggoths move underground and hate elves, they have actually been recruited, you could say, by some drow. And this gives me a perfect idea for our next little Survivor Durgar's encounter. Next up, our small group will face off against a drow, obviously, specifically an elite warrior. I won't go too in depth with drow lore, because I may end up using them as their own faction later on in one of these. I will give the basics, though. Drow are what was usually referred to as dark elves in other fantasy settings, and they mostly live in the Underdark and worship Lolth, a spider goddess. It's a matriarchal society that's very dangerous to live in general, honestly. It's a lot of, I guess you could say, like, espionage, if you want to put it like that. Kind of, basically, political motivations, all that, power is the main focus of a drow. Now, this obviously isn't too important for a Duergar, since they'll only be facing a single elite warrior, mostly because the combat challenge rating, how weird the challenge rating matches up. If you're inexperienced with D&D, quick warning, never trust challenge rating. It's basically just random numbers thrown onto creatures, or at least feels like it sometimes. Anyway, let's move on to this battle with the Drow Elite Warrior. Okay, opening the map. Here we can see the Duergar run into the Elite Drow and see who reacts first. Looks like the Drow was the slowest to react, and the Soul Blade uses its turn to activate invisibility and move around the Drow, while the Hammerer moves 30 feet towards the Drow and uses the dodge action. And with their high AC, that should make sure they're safe from any potential attacks. Now, with the Stone Guard turn, first they'll activate Enlarge and then move towards the Drow. Not very eventful, but it's probably the best move for the Duergar. So, now while outnumbered, the Drow may be able to win just off better stats alone. First thing, the Drow would have used Fairy Fire to stop any invisibility, but it's a bit late for that now. It's still useful, though, so it can give them advantage to help them get through the Duergar's high AC. The Drow will cast it on the Stone Guard first, also making sure to catch the Hammerer in it as well. And with their low dex, both fail. This will give the Drow advantage on attacks against them both. The Soul Blade will get to use their invisibility to sneak up on the Drow and get hopefully an easy attack. And with the advantage, the Soul Blade just barely manages to land a hit, dealing 12 force damage. And they're once again visible. But this will leave the Drow on 59 HP. Which is decent, considering they started around 72. And they will have to manage to land the rest of the hits with that advantage now, though. And back to the hammer, they will attempt to use both attacks on the Drow. They have a multi-attack, one with the hammer and one with the claw. Both attacks miss, one a critical failure. The Stone Guard still has a chance to deal some damage, though, with a multi-attack. The Stone Guard manages to break through and roll max damage on the first hit, dealing 16. Rolling high enough to even beat the Drow's parry reaction. The second attack misses. Second attack misses. Anyway, now it's back to the Drow. They have the highest potential damage output here, and they should be able to win this if they're pretty lucky. I would say the Drow would see the Stone Guard as the most dangerous here, so they'll probably be attacked first. The Drow's multi-attack allows them 2 swings of their short sword, which aren't very impressive alone, but the short sword has a poison property, which is pretty effective since it adds 3d6. Unfortunately, Duergar are resistant to poison, like most dwarves, though, which the first swing does connect and deals 14 damage. Maybe not resistant enough. The second misses with a very low 3, and the Soul Blade can swing once again, and does manage to hit the Drow with a 23, which beats out their parry. Onto the Hammerer, they will attempt their multi-attack again. The Hammerer finally manages to do something, and let's see, they will land 1 attack with their claw, dealing only 6 damage, and missing with the hammer itself. Okay. The Stone Guard tries 2 attacks, once again missing the first and almost connecting the second, but the Drow's parry beats that out. And back to the Drow, they will swing their sword once more. Unfortunately for them, neither a 12 or 16 break the Stone Guard's AC. Luckily, Fairy Fire gives advantage and lets 1 shot get through, dealing 12 damage. Now, the Soul Blade swings again, finally missing with an 11, which ends a very unremarkable turn for them. And now the Hammerer swings, dealing 11 damage, and the second hit gets parried. The 11 was enough to leave the Drow on 12 HP, which means this will probably go in the Duergar's favor. Now for the Stone Guard's attack, the first misses, while the follow-up manages to be so high that even if the Drow parried it, wouldn't stop the Stone Guard. And with the massive swing of their short sword, the Drow elite is finally defeated. Okay. Next time I do a combat, I'll throw in some more fodder, since clearly one big strong opponent loses to some weaker ones. Which I should have known, since I know what turn economy is as a concept. Anyway, that shouldn't be a problem for our last encounter at least. So first, we'll roll some small damage from the fall for our other Duragar. It'll be nice, to make it at least somewhat low so they aren't too crippled by it, and so they don't die too quickly in what's supposed to be their display, basically. Anyway, after this long fall, the Duragar end up in a foul-smelling pit covered in slime and bone, and most denizens of the Underdark would know what sort of creature lives in areas like these, and since I assume you all do not, I will be introducing our final monster for this video. Say hello, everyone, to the Troglodyte. This is what's described as a foul creature of the Underdark, and it lives in what is quoted as the shallow depths, covering their homes in filth. They have camouflage built into their skin and are just intelligent as Quaggoths, but they are nowhere near as strong as a Quaggoth. Anyway, they're also part... let's see. Oh, they're also called the most loathsome of all humanoids, eating anything they can. Point being, that's what these Duragar are about to encounter, and while a 4 against 3 may seem unfair, if you read the stat block, you'll realize Troglodytes are not very strong, which is why they will be the fight for these Duragar here, or maybe a warm-up if the Duragar do really well. And the Duragar, once again, very low passive perception, so they probably won't notice the hidden Troglodytes. These Troglodytes will get a surprise round first. Okay, so I was going to do a whole combat here with the Troglodytes and the Duragar, but just look what the Troglodytes did during their surprise round here. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Going to our Duragar, they will immediately use Enlarge, and the Troglodyte, who got a 13, will move and attack the I hate this guy. Zaroran, Anyway, that guy will, deal 6 damage, and Zaroran will use Enlarge, pushing the Troglodyte back. They will also use Fire Spray, which manages to hit both Troglodytes to the left, and with a 10 and 11, they both fail to evade the Fire Spray, taking 14 damage, which just manages to cook them both. The other 2 Troglodytes attack the remaining Duragar. The first fails to get past the AC, while the second manages to kill the Duragar. Now back to the Zaroran. The first move is to line up and attack against one of the Troglodytes, and the Enlarged Fire Lance manages to deal 18 damage, skewering the Troglodyte instantly. And the final Troglodyte tries to attack the Zaroran, only managing 1 bite, dealing 3 damage. And the Troglodyte will need to be very lucky to survive this. Oh, never mind. Zaroran rolled a crit. This Troglodyte is obliterated. Oh, and after rolling this crit, the obliterated may be literal, because they got about 50 damage, about more than double the health. Anyway, that would have killed a Quaggoth in one shot too, actually. There was realistically never a chance the Troglodyte beat that. Anyway, the Zaroran, honestly, is probably just left to wait here till the Quaggoths come down to grab him. But it's a small victory, That about concludes this video. Videos will be running off a rotation on this channel. There will be 3 types, at least at the moment. This video is one where I have different monsters face off, The background of a group is just something I added for fun. Not every video will have a background or backstory like that. The other type, which I will be posting this week, is where I'll convert a monster into a different type. For example, something like a humanoid into a plant, undead, something like that. You understand? For an example, turning an orc from a humanoid into a plant. That theoretical would probably just end up a reference to 40k orcs, though. Anyway, finally, there will be deep dives into one or a few monsters of a specific type. These videos will rotate in this order, and I plan to say what will be done with the next video of the same kind at the end of the last of that kind. So this next video, the next video for this type, I should say, where it's a group, I'll be using a group of orcs who have a surprising amount of variety once you look into it a bit. And since there isn't a type of video to explain what the next one will be, obviously, I'll just say it here. The next video, I'll be converting the Abominable and regular Yeti into an undead, which I think will make an interesting monster. Anyway, obviously, if you enjoyed it, or, are, wanting to see more, you can expect the content on the channel to improve, obviously. First video, so it's going to be a bit rough, but, variety, I hope to be improving, basically. And if you enjoyed it, obviously subscribe, like, all the usual. And I'll see you all next video. Or I'll see some of you. I don't know.